Divya Deshmukh is the 2025 Women's World Cup champion. At just 19 years of age, she went undefeated and overcame some of the strongest names in women's chess. In this video, we'll look at her journey to the title by analyzing a few of her key games. Each one highlights different aspect of her play: calculation, positional clarity, and decision making under pressure. So let's take a closer look at the games that shaped her path to the championship. So in this game, she has white pieces and she's playing against Giladze. So this is from one of the earlier rounds. So let's try to understand this a bit further. Divya has the double bishop advantage. That's good. Black's rook is a bit active. This bishop restricted. Divya has pushed the pawns on the king side, put some pressure there. And in this position, she remains consistent and plays g5 to try to do something there. Now if h takes e5 is played, then h takes e5 and then the h file gets opened, and this is not good for black. So her opponent decides to play knight h5. Wait, is there not this idea of g takes h6? Because then if I can go after the pawn, but that is not the most accurate move, because if that is played, then there is this move knight g3. Now some of you would be thinking, okay, so what? We can play h takes g7. If king takes g7, maybe we can pin and do something. But black is not forced to do that. Black can play, for example, in this position, rook to c8 or even rook to b8 actually. Because if rook h e1 is played, then capture, then rook takes f3. This pawn is quite weak. This is also weak. And in this case, so a rook c8 can also be possible, but then black will need to carefully calculate this bishop into a6. So instead of that, better, as I said, this rook b8, and then black gets counterplay. So that's why Divya did not go for g takes h6. She went after another pawn, the a6 pawn. She had seen that black is not able to capture this pawn because the bishop would get back and then win the knight. So then her opponent played knight g3. She's like, all right, I'll improve my knight's position and then I will capture the f3 pawn. Divya is not worried. She played rook h3. Now in this position, black captures this. And once again, that pin is there and things can get quite unpleasant. So black played knight e4. Now black is down a pawn and she's trying to complicate the matters. So there is this, there can be knight f2 ideas as well. But Divya is calm and precise. She plays the move rook e1. He's like, all right, you want to play knight f2, you do it, but there won't be a fork. So Divya's opponent plays f5. She's also trying to keep the matters complicated with each and every move. Then Divya in this position calmly plays the move king b2. She's like, this is a target, and now I'm planning to play rook takes e4, and then there will be king takes e3. So our opponent plays knight f2. Like, all right, I'll attack this rook. Now, Divya plays the move rook g3, keeping the attack on the rook and then dealing with this threat. Our opponent plays f4. Now it looks like things are not that great because Divya's pieces are under pressure and black is playing a bit aggressively. But we have to remember that with precise calculation, you can deal with these things. And Divya had seen more. She knows that her pieces are getting passive, but she had planned something in this position, and that is bishop e2, because once the rook moves, then she wins the knight, she's up a piece, and then she went on to win the game. So a really nice game by her, because she started with g5, but then after she went for that pawn, she knew that there would be that relentless pressure from black on the king side, but she was quite precise in handling that and neutralized black's activity and emerged victorious. So let's go for the next game of Divya. So in this one, Divya has black pieces and she is playing against Inyak Theodora. So it looks like about equal endgame 2 rooks knight versus 2 rooks bishop. White's rook is a bit active. It's not like it would be difficult for Divya to push for the win in such endgame. But how he does that, how he outplays her opponent is really instructive. So she starts with the move rook a6. So there are currently no open files in the position, but she wants to activate the rook, and for that she is making use of the rook lift. Rook b1, then rook e8. What is that rook doing here? We'll see. King f1 was played by white. Divya played the move rook b6. So her plan of rook e8 was to defend that pawn so this rook can get active. So she's planning to play maybe rook b4 and then put some pressure. So her opponent plays b3. She plays rook b4. She's like, all right, my rook has been improved. King e2 is played. So she plays g6 to restrict that bishop. Then bishop d3 is played. So because of something like bishop g4, then there is knight e4. So bishop d3 was played. Now it's time to restrict that active rook of white. So knight d7. Then she plays f5. She is like, I don't want to allow any of those e4 pawn breaks or something. I'll just restrict the center as well. Rook g1. No need to rush. Let's improve the king's position. Now white also tries to play actively on the king side. White knows that if she doesn't do something active, then Divya will slowly but steadily improve. Then keep the pressure. So Divya is not worried. H takes z3 and then rook takes z3 is played. So a really important quality of a strong player is that they keep an eye on the whole board and not just one part of the board. And in this position, after h takes g3, rook takes g3, Divya recognized that there is an isolated pawn on the h file, and she's like, all right, I'll keep an eye on that pawn. So he's not able to win it or something, but still that pressure is not that pleasant for white to face. So in this, Inyat plays the move king d2. Now Divya plays the move c5, a really instructive move because she's challenging the center. And if d takes c5, this knight can get active, this rook can get shifted there, there can be d4 ideas. And now those restricted rooks of white, those restricted pieces are actually starting to show. So white went for this move rook bg1. She's like, all right, you want my queenside pawns, you go for it, but I'll take your g6 pawn. Divya is not worried. She goes for the move c takes d4. But what if rook takes g6 was played? See, she was not worried because she had planned knight e5, centralizing the knight. If rook g7, then there is king f6. There is this threat. There is this threat. And things are actually unpleasant for white. So she played the move c takes d4. White recognized that rook takes e6 is not as strong because of knight e5. So she took this. Then this. Once again, rook takes g6 is not working because there is rook takes d3 and knight e5 check. And that would be just bad. So king c3 was played. Divya plays rook f4. Inyat goes for the move rook takes c6. Divya plays the move knight e5. Centralization of the knight with a tempo. Check. Rook is on the 7th rank. Yes, but the thing is that it's not restricting the king. And Divya has her own ideas of d4 or rook c8 or rook f3 to keep up the pressure. Then in this position, white plays rook 7 g3. She's like, I don't want to allow any of this rook f3 or those type of ideas. Let me just defend my d3 bishop. Divya pushes the pawn. Then she picks up another pawn. And then she pushes this pass pawn. Once the rook moves, then this will fall. And then white resigns. So a really nice endgame by Divya where first, with the help of that rook a6, rook b6, rook lift, she put pressure on the queen side. And once some weaknesses were created on the king side, she put the pressure there. And then there was that pawn break. And she won the game in a really instructive manner. So let's go for the next game. So in this, Divya has white pieces. And this is a game from quarterfinals. And she's playing against Grandmaster Harika. So Divya is in a check in this position. So she goes king g2. And then in this position, Harika makes a mistake. And Divya takes full advantage of it. So there is clear pressure in Harika's position because of this king side. This bishop is quite active versus Harika's bishop that is restricted. So in this position, Harika should have played something like queen c6, just defending the pawn, and it's a bit unpleasant position for her, but nothing that she can't play long for. But in this position, instead of defending that pawn with the queen, she decides to defend it with the pawn, and Divya takes full advantage of it. So she plays the move queen b8 check. The idea is that after rook f8, she can shift her queen to d6. Now look at her queen, keeping the pressure on the queen side, can put pressure on the king side. And more importantly, look at Harika's queen. It's not doing as much. That's a problem. And then in this position, so if Harika had played, for example, in this position queen a2, this is still bad because king h1. Now these rooks, along with the bishop and of course the queen, they're all playing. If g6, then it is just mate. Yeah, this is lost. So really instructive idea of bringing the queen in the attack. And so Harika played queen b7. She's like, all right, let's keep the queen in a more defensive mode. But then Divya found a really nice tactic. So we should always be alert in such type of attacking positions, because certain tactical opportunity might be present and that would give us a winning position. And Divya finds it, playing bishop takes g7. This is not a blunder. See, she sacrifices the piece temporarily. So the point is that if rook takes g7, so queen takes e7 was played by Harika, and then king f1, and then Divya won the queen, and then she went on to win the game later on. But some of you would be thinking that, wait, could Harika have not just captured with the king? What's wrong with it? No. So in this position, Divya was planning to play the move king h1. So if king h8, then this is mate. So king f7 is the only move. And then she has a really strong move, that is centralization of the queen. She would be threatening this checkmate. And if rook g8 is played, then just queen f5 check. Once the king moves, then rook takes g8. Because of that, Harika could not capture that that rook with the king. She had to capture with the queen. After king f1, the game went on for a bit, but Divya was always winning, and then she converted the game in a convincing manner, and later won the match against Harika. So let's look at another game, Divya. This time we're looking at the final. So the classical portion of the final. So it was 1-1. Then in the tie breaks, the rapid tie break, the first game was a draw. And here we are at the second game, where, of course, the other finalist, the other Indian, Grandmaster Koneru Hampi. So she was playing, she has white pieces, and Divya is black. So let's try to understand this position. So Hampi has these pass pawns. By the way, these pawns are going this side, these pawns are going this side, if in case someone is confused. So in this position, Divya decides to push her pass pawn. She's like, all right, I have a pass pawn, but this is blocked, so let me push it. I'll move the king and then try to push it further. In this position, Hampi, under pressure, see, you have to remember, the title is on the line. So mistakes are natural, and Hampi blunders in this position. So she should have played king e5. The point is that king g2 is not possible because this would fall. If rook a5 check is played, then the king can move, and then there would be some h7 type of threat, so it's not that pleasant. And if black plays something like king g3, then there is this very nice move, rook check. If king f2, then rook a1, and if f3 is played, then there is this move, king f4. So the point is that if this, then there is this. It's a very narrow save, but Hampi would actually survive. So the point in this position is that if something like this, and capture this, and then she would play this, and it would eventually be a draw, since Divya would have to sacrifice the rook for the pass pawn at some point. But easier said than done. When such pressure is there, it's not easy to find such things. And Hampi plays another natural move, that is h7. She's like, all right, let me give this pass pawn of mine to capture Divya's pass pawn. But that's a mistake, because after rook takes h7, rook takes a2, Divya is like, I can win this pawn anytime I want. I'll play king g3. I want to push my pass pawn. So Humpy plays the move rook a8, but then Divya captures this pawn, rook g8 check, just rook g4, rook f8, f3. The king is also cut off. King e5 was played, f2, rook f7 was played, king g2, and Humpy resigned in this position, and Divya became the 2025 Women's World Cup champion. Also, the World Cup winner gets the Grandmaster title, and Divya became only the 4th woman from India to get the Grandmaster title. So most of the time what happens is that the World Cup is won by someone who is already a Grandmaster. So it's but this time we saw an international master, Divya Deshmukh, winning the World Cup and getting the Grandmaster title as well, apart from the World Cup championship. So congratulations to her, and let's wish her the best for the candidates tournament, the tournament that will the winner of it will play against the world champion Joe and John. Thanks everyone for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.